if you are opening with decentralization, then the continuation to the next part will become difficult. See, if I had to attempt this question, what I'll start with, I'll not start with local bodies, I'll start with good governance. There's a reason for it. So essentially, if I tell good governance, I have to promote at union level, state level, and local level. This is the most important part since it is in direct connect with the citizens. Exactly, that is the word which I was looking for. That is, urbanization of rural areas is one point, where rural areas are having urban characteristics. But is that such a big point, considering most of India is still rural? Bodies and ULBs. Just take a couple of minutes and read this question once you note it down. Now, this is a question from this year's paper. Analyze the role of local bodies in providing good governance and bring out the pros and cons in merging rural and urban local bodies. Now read this question and think about it for a minute at least. How would you approach? Have everybody gone through the question once? So if I tell what are the parts of the question? Yes, anybody here? Tell me two important parts of this question.
I think there are three parts of it. First, we have to address how local government is promoting good governance.
Okay.
Then about what are the advantages and disadvantages of merging rural local bodies with the urban.
Okay, fine. Anybody else? Don't think about the content, just the parts.
Role of local bodies and pros and cons.
Okay. So clearly, most of you are clear that there are two parts. Role of local bodies in providing good governance, and then you have pros and cons in merging rural local bodies and urban local bodies. Right. So now, how will I introduce? Think of a particular thing. Introduce.
So whether we can mention about decentralization, how effectively
you will, if you are opening with decentralization, then the continuation to the next part will become difficult. Your next part is this. So you are bringing in one more element, decentralization. Then from decentralization, you have to link good governance. Then you have to come to do. Your introduction should be such that it becomes very smooth for you to go to the first part. Anybody else?
Local bodies are present of constitution with articles.
Okay. Then how will you link it here? Good governance.
So can you give any examples of how the local government is enhancing good governance? Like they are effectively addressing the environmental disintegration.
Disintegration of?
Yeah, like that. The Grama Sabha will be more concerns about any environmental disintegration like this. So some examples like in Himachal Pradesh, the Sarpanch is more concerned about the mining operation that is happening there. So,
that is one good way. This can be taken as an option. You take an example of a rural local body where it is promoting good governance, one element.
Directly ऐसे भी लिख सकता है कि local bodies के introduction के बाद से government हुआ है. Just decline.
Just, I would always dissuade to write generic statements. तो वो difference थोड़ा सा mark में आ जाता है. See, if I had to attempt this question, what I'll start with, I'll not start with local bodies, I'll start with good governance. There's a reason for it. The entire question is about local bodies. So I know I have to handle local bodies for the next 250 words. If I bring in good governance in between, it will become difficult for me to structure good governance somewhere in between for the ones who are starting out. So I start with good governance. I probably give a definition of good governance and the role of local body is that it operates at local level or the third tier of the government. So essentially, if I tell good governance, I have to promote at union level, state level, and local level. This is the most important part since it is in direct connect with the citizens. They are more aware of the problems, and since you're more aware of the problems, you can use good governance to provide it a solution. So you can think it either way. My point of taking this particular question is especially this, usually anybody you ask them, 95% of them will start with local governance because the question is on local governance. But it becomes easier once you start with good governance. And good governance, this is the base of the pyramid, local government, and the fulcrum of governance to implement any governance measure. Now, I would want you to write it down. Like anytime a particular question comes where it is asking you a relation between 2 points, that is like for this instance, local governance and good governance. So I can represent it if I represent it this way. So basically, either I can approach it here, as he said, through example. But not every time you will be able to recall when you have to write an answer in 8 to 9 minutes, a proper example. So it might make it look a bit naive and superficial. In that case, find which is the main theme of the question. Here the main theme is local governance. So include good governance in introduction and conclusion. Am I clear of this part? I'll tell you. Infrastructure is at the fulcrum of economic development. In light of this, analyze the various infrastructural steps taken by the government. Now here again you have infrastructure and economic development. The second part asks you analyze the role of infrastructure, analyze the government steps in the infrastructure sector. So again you have this model, you have 2 points where you have infra and economic development. You can talk here about, if I take your route, PM Gati Shakti plan, it focuses on both infra and economic development. Or if you're not getting any particular example at that time, start with economic development, come to infrastructure, and then again conclude with economic development. Statement based questions are often the most repeated questions in UPSC. There's no rocket science there how you approach it. This is the most simplest way how you go about. But once you're structured ready, fill in the content which you have. So now there are 4 or 5 approaches of starting a particular question. We just saw, you gave some, I gave some. This is a very safe approach for you to get more marks. Now once you're done with the introduction of this part, you introduce with good governance. Then you move to the first half, which talks about how effective has it been. So this is going to be a body in promoting good governance. There you're going to write a number of points on how local governments have promoted good governance. The most important aspect of this part of your answer is examples and case studies. Because even if you write any point, during a public health emergency, local governments are the first responders. Give the example of COVID to substantiate your answer. During the time of disaster management, again, these are the first responders and the first ones to provide relief and rehabilitation. Give the example of Wayanad floods. That is where the difference in mark comes. Now, then you move into, this is very interesting, the question UPSC has asked, like merging rural and urban bodies. Now, why would have UPSC asked this?
Administration आसान हो जाए, funds अच्छे से लोग किए जाए.
Okay. Any other? This, why we created 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, and then panchayats and municipalities came into existence. Now we'll have a new panchayat plus municipality. Why so? Why?
Because of the transition of rural areas, even now they are developing. So
One, I can probably tell yes, rural development, but
the urbanization of rural areas.
exactly, that is the word which I was looking for. That is, urbanization of rural areas is one point, where rural areas are having urban characteristics. But is that such a big point, considering most of India is still rural? Based on a census definitions and the definitions of various surveys, which you'll read in your static portion, the proportion of rural areas is still large. Your thought process is correct. What is the reason?
So it's because of the various lot of local government existing at the ground level, so they thought of synchronizing it for effective implementation.
Okay.
Because we take municipal life is kind of different kind of administration existing.
Okay. Okay, Gayatri, this she has told a point because one nation, one election issue was going on maybe. Now, don't think why the question is asked. Tell me why urban areas rural and urban areas are getting merged, or why are they promoting it that there should be a merger of urban local bodies and rural local bodies. It's a good point, urban agglomeration. Now, what is urban agglomeration? First, I say urbanization of rural areas. Then you have urban agglomeration. Urban agglomeration is becoming an issue to tackle, but again, what is the reason behind that?
What is urban agglomeration?
Urban agglomeration, suppose there's Delhi, there's Noida, there's Gurgaon, there's Faridabad. This is an urban area. Now, as this particular area gets developed, we are moving more towards Faridabad. Faridabad is also expanding. Gurgaon is moving towards Delhi. Delhi is also expanding. We have the NCR region. This is the urban agglomeration. I will tell one particular article which we are going to read today, that is rural urban continuum. That is the only reason, that is the biggest reason in fact, only would be wrong to tell because you have given a couple of reasons. That is the reason why this is getting proposed. For example, now this is an urban area. Now when urban area expands, it captures rural areas within its ambit. Now this is a rural area, suppose. In policy circles, this is being run by the rural plan, which is being run by Panchayat. This area, which is expanding, the urban area, this is based on a city development plan, which is managed by urban area. Now it gradually develops. Now this city development plan is suppose developing for this particular region. What of this development? Essentially they were rural areas previously. Now they are coming under the ambit of the urban development. That is why the sustainability of urban development is also coming at question, because the green spaces around the urban areas are being captured for real estate, infrastructure development, etc. The reason why this question, if I had to tell, was asked, it was because of rural-urban continuum. That is there in your current affairs article, which we will be doing today. And especially, if you take a particular case study, this is what a Kerala model of urban development is. Because if you see the regions of Kerala, the planning there is quite different, and they take into account the rural-urban continuum into picture. In fact, till now, most of such plans were being planned out in touristy places. Like Goa has an element of that. But this is what is going to happen as and when India's urban infrastructure develops. And that is where the merger of rural and urban local bodies comes into picture. That is where our governance structure has to change to meet the new challenges which we are having with this new space which is being developed. Ultimately, every governance structure is created for a particular geography. I say geography 1, geography 2, geography 3, which has its, now this is subject how you generate multiple dimensions and how you think. Now each geography has its own particular history, own particular society, and that is what is everywhere. Now if we are developing a new geographical space which is rural-urban continuum, but we don't have its governance structure, so this is one way forward.